Karlo Margetić. As always, it's a thrill to speak with you. I was just speaking to your better half about her wonderful music. And for me to speak with you, to speak about your music is particularly thrilling to me because you've written actually 2 works for Orchestra Wellington, and you were our composer in residence for actually a period of 3 years in a variety of guises between 2012 through to 2014, your final work being a magnificent masterpiece in my view, entitled Melting Furniture, and we'll get to that, which was premiered in 2015. Karlo, like Taddei, you are not only a gifted composer, but you're also an accomplished instrumentalist. You are a clarinet player. You've also formed a contemporary...
I was a clarinet player.
You were a clarinet player.
Yeah, I tried playing the other day and my face nearly fell off.
Oh, tell me about it. You know, I used to be a trombone player, and when I pick it up now, I know what it's meant to feel like, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. It's totally alien, and playing an instrument is an intellectual pursuit, but it's possibly even more a physical pursuit. The best musicians are those that are thinking just of the music, the idea, and not necessarily thinking of setup or anything like that. They're just doing it because it feels natural, it feels right. If you stop playing and become a composer or a conductor, you lose that physical connection to the music. I mean, do you miss that?
Yeah, but it's just finding the time and the opportunity to play is kind of tough when you're doing other stuff. Stuff you're better at.
There are certain composers that started out as virtuoso players, Paganini, Liszt, Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, Chopin, and many of them ceased to be virtuosos as they became totally focused on the craft of composing, because it's hard, isn't it? It's difficult.
Yeah. And I was always a better composer than I was a clarinetist, so
I've known of you for quite some time and have been inspired by your obvious gifts, but it was your work Lightbox that was commissioned by the NZ Trio that really made me totally enamored of your art. It's a work that won the 2013 Sounds Contemporary Award, and I have no hesitancy in saying it's a complete masterpiece. So when you won that award, and of course I was expecting it once the 3 finalists were named. I had been hearing the piece because my wife Justine Cormack was in the NZ Trio at that point, so I had heard it many times by that point in concert, and it was a piece that was extremely sophisticated, but it also grew on one the more one listened to it. So that was great. And then, of course, there are works that you wrote that I think the APO performed, a magnificent Xylophone Concerto, which our percussionist Brent Stewart, who also is the music director of Orpheus Choir, a person that I also interviewed for this series, he played. And actually, let's start getting into this kind of wacky nature of your music a little bit. I hope you don't mind me using the word wacky, because I mean it as a high compliment. But in the Xylophone Composer, you had people playing those squeezy, squeaky rubber ducks.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. It was
fantastic. Why not?
Why not, indeed? It was visual, of course, so for a person watching it, there was this humor quotient, but then if you listen to it, it was this kind of unique, almost alien sound. So if you listen to it on a recording, it sounds great, it makes musical sense. And this speaks to the idea of music being live, being experienced live being the most important thing. Because for someone who might be dozing off in the middle of the piece, though that hardly ever happens with your music, but if they woke up thinking, what is that unearthly sound? And then you see 15 people playing these little rubber ducks, it creates yet another layer to your art. Speak a little bit about that, and then segue into Melting Furniture, because I think that's wacky also.
Well, the Xylophone Concerto, I wrote it when I was a student. I think in first year, I heard Brent play in a composer workshop, and we got talking and sort of figured out that we had the same kind of wacky sense of humor. And I thought, well, you know, the xylophone, it doesn't get much love. Um, you know, everyone's, oh, the marimba is so great. I would never write for the marimba. There's
Okay.
something about the attack combining with a kind of low,
Uh-huh.
yeah, there's a disconnect there that I don't like. But the xylophone, it just kind of cuts through.
Yes.
And of course, but you got to be careful, you know, not to make it sound too funny.
Mhm.
So this piece, for a long time, it was the longest piece I'd written, and it was kind of like a little, well, not little, an experimentation thing for a young composer. And you can definitely see when, you know, you listen through to the piece, oh, he's discovered ligeti, or, you know, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a very fun piece to write,
Yeah.
and to, you know, collaborate with Brent, who is just brilliant.
Yeah.
So how to segue to Melting Furniture? Melting Furniture comes 8 years after the Xylophone Concerto, and it's, how do I talk about it? The piano is a very kind of rigid instrument as far as tuning is concerned. And of course, there are pieces that make use of, you know, slightly detuned pianos, like Griset's Vortex Temporum, which is a wonderful piece. But, you know, it requires you to retune the piano and then retune it another time so that it stays out of tune, and it's, you know, kind of an expensive undertaking. And then there's limited approximations by Haas, where you have 6 microtonally tuned grand pianos, tuned like a 12th tone apart or something. It's a brilliant piece, but also quite kind of grandiose and ridiculous. So I kind of wanted to play with the tuning of the piano. So if the piano is the furniture, then the stuff around it is causing it to melt. In this case, it's an electronic keyboard, though it can be an upright piano as well, if need be. It's been tuned a quarter tone flat, and a cello that's been amplified, and that's played kind of like a you know, Hawaiian
guitar, yes.
slide guitar. Yeah.
Right, in fact, we call it a slide cello in the score.
A slide cello. Well, I mean, that part could also be played on a guitar, with a few tweaks. So the idea was to have this kind of detuned kind of noise halo, if you will, around the piano. So it's not as impractical as maybe detuning the piano, but you still have the effect of this kind of oddness of microtones.
It's an extraordinary work, and for a little background, we wanted you to write a work for Michael Huston. Of course, he is one of the great advocates of New Zealand contemporary music, and I just thought it would be wonderful for one of the early generation great composers of New Zealand to work with one of the most established and one of the greatest New Zealand performers. And then when you brought the score in, it was a bit of a shock, because all of a sudden it was like almost a triple concerto. I mean, granted, Michael had the biggest part, but then we had Emma Sayers playing the quarter tone piano, and then of course our very own Brenton Veach, our principal cellist, doing the slide cello. Now, I just want to speak a little bit about this because I love it. It really is brilliant. And for me, what's really brilliant about it is that you create this sort of melting, almost hallucinogenic effect by having the quarter tone piano sort of ghost, maybe canonically sometimes or imitatively, what's been done by the piano, but not playing everything and just slightly behind, and then having the cello do this pitched kind of sort of cut rate un matino, or Hawaiian guitar. and the effect on the look of it on the page is wonderful to study, but the actual effect in real life is exquisite, and it's a thing of strange and exquisite beauty. Now, talk to me about how you came up with this idea, and also, so this is actually something that I'd like to know. Sometimes composers write things, and sometimes they're not completely aware of what they're going to sound like in real life. That occasionally happens. In the case of this, which to me seems so wacky, yet so beautiful, were you surprised at all by the effects that you were able to create, or did it just come to you?
Well, I mean, I wasn't surprised by the effect because I'd been thinking about it for a year, and really rigorously planning the certain practical aspects of it. We should say that another added layer of complication is that the three instruments that make up the melting bit are rhythmically decoupled from the rest of the orchestra for quite a substantial amount of the piece, like 80% of the piece. So there's a problem of having them stay together and then having the orchestra kind of overlaid on top of that, and coordinating the entries precisely. And I was quite happy that it worked, and that the first rehearsal with the contratante group and the orchestra was actually pretty smooth.
It was. Well, look, I mean, that's a testament to you, to your craft. And also I want to say, having spoken to Taddei, this working with amateurs and professionals and young kids, that worked very, very smoothly as well. And I think that's an aspect of composition that maybe the people watching this are maybe not so appreciative of, is that putting things together sometimes can be very, very difficult. And I think it's a mark of a really fine composer, a practical composer who's able to write works of incredible complexity and yet package them in such a way that they can be assimilated by an orchestra reasonably quickly.
I think that's kind of a symptom of having played in orchestras since I was, 12. So I know the practicalities of, the conductor giving a beat and how that, reverberates through the orchestra, where you can be uncoordinated, where you can be coordinated. There are pieces where you can not even have a conductor. Sorry, Mark. And it'll be fine. But then there's a tempo change or like a slower accelerando or something, and then it turns to rubbish. And that's when we realize we do need a conductor. But within that, those kind of coordination possibilities, there's so much you can do. And just, thinking of the music of Lutoslawski, and his kind of controlled chaos, where he writes little repeating things that the conductor indicates the beginning and the end, but the texture is kind of unpredictable because the instruments are playing these little things that overlap and that aren't necessarily coordinated. So I've always loved that sort of thing. One of my great loves is counterpoint and chucking stuff on top of other stuff. So Ives 4 changed my world, as well as, lots of ligeti and stuff like that.
One can hear these influences, though, Can I Say Melting Furniture is a unique work. I think one of your particular gifts is that you're able to play with these quite radical approaches to music, to be able to come in and hear indeterminacy, quarter tones, unfixed pitch, different time signatures happening at the same time, and yet package it in such a way that it's beautiful, it's humorous, and it's emotive. Like, the work of Taddei, your work is very sophisticated, but it really grabs an audience. And I just have to say that there was something about your work that was genuine, like like the Scherzo alla Russe that we did by Stravinsky, or the Pathétique. These were three genuine works of three very different time periods, just making their case, I thought, quite eloquently to the audience. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's been wonderful watching your career over the past 15 years at least. What's the latest? I know that, well, a little backstory for the people watching this. We had actually done an interview during the first lockdown, but because of my total ineptitude with things technological, I lost it. So here we are in the second lockdown doing this interview. But I would like to know what you're working on now, because last week when I called you to set this up, you said, oh, can we push it back a week, because both Taddei and I are in the midst of writing commissions. So what are you writing? What are you working on?
At the moment, I'm writing a trio for violin, clarinet, and percussion. And that's for, that's the instrumentation of a group in the US called F+. So the F+ trio, I think they're based in Chicago, and you know, and environs, and they're really, you know, quite a brilliant group. So I'm in the middle of writing a piece for them, which is also going to be played by Ensemble Offspring in Sydney and Stroma here. Yeah, but you know, COVID permitting.
Yes.
It's a series of 7 movements, kind of miniature type things, which is kind of a new thing for me, because I tend to write these kind of long span arc type pieces. And I thought, well, why not change it up a bit? See if I can do little shards instead of long line. I'm noticing that even though it's quite, you know, rigidly sectional, sort of like a dry stone wall kind of thing, it still has a long form that's kind of insidiously creeped in. So
that doesn't surprise me, by the way, because your works are always very, very structural. And this brings up a question that I have. When you start a work, so you have this this idea that you might do 7 small sections.
Yeah.
But as you compose a piece, does the piece reveal itself to you, or are you a little bit like a Mozart kind of guy who doesn't put pen to paper until you have it worked out in your head?
Well, actually, not that I think about it. It's kind of a mix, because I don't really hear the detail before I, you know, start writing, you know, the micro detail, but I can't start writing until I have a pretty good idea of a macro structure, because then you know what you're aiming for, right? But as you work, as you start pushing notes around, as you start thinking about chords and sonorities and rhythms and whatever, that plan has to change. So usually what I think the piece will be at the beginning is not what it winds up being at the end, but it's absolutely necessary to have a game plan before the pencil starts making scribbles.
Taddei is just gonna pop up and then disappear.
Bam!
Yeah, bam.
And now she's gone.
Yeah, that's impressive. It's really great to have both of you guys in this series. That's, for me, it's wonderful because it adds luster to the orchestra, and it also, I think hopefully people that watch it will get a sense of, wow, you know, we've been doing some really cool things down here. So
yeah,
we'll see.
We have, and we keep doing them.
We do.